Hi, welcome to Creative Spirit. And today we're going to explore with Melanie a different way of expressing creativity. And we know that often it's deep in the soul, so we're going to try to explore that a little bit, dig it out, and see how Melanie and her garden communicate with each other. So, welcome, Melanie.
Hi, Trudy. How are you doing?
Good. Nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too. It's a nice day out in the garden.
Yeah, you look great. I can hardly wait to see the tour. Can you maybe start us off a little bit about creativity and how that feels to you? And some people say, well, it's a thought process, and some say it's more of an emotional thing, and others say, I don't even think about it sometimes. So, how does that fit for you?
Well, knowing we were going to talk about this today, I have been thinking about creativity and how it feels to me. And um yeah, sometimes it's thought, sometimes it's emotion. I think when I really start working in the garden, I don't think about it. I'm just looking to see what's going on in the garden, how the plants are growing, if there's anything new growing, if there's areas that need some assistance with watering, or if some plants need to trim or thinned a little bit so that things can grow and bloom and be strong and healthy.
Yeah, so it's a nourishing and nurturing experience, it sounds like. So,
Yeah.
do you ever get surprises where things just show up that you hadn't planned?
Oh, yeah. And maybe I should walk around the house for this one,
Okay.
because there's this gigantic lily
Hmm.
that I don't know where it came from. And one year it was just suddenly there. And it is taller than I am now. So it's close to 6 feet tall. Um, and I'm not sure how the seed came to the garden, whether it was a bird or it blew in from the wind, or maybe it was in some mulch. And when I mulched the garden, the lily seed came in, but I didn't see a small lily. The year I saw it, it was already about 3 feet tall.
It looks like a very large Easter lily from what I can see. Would you describe it that way? Do you know what kind of lily it is?
I think it's a trumpet lily, and they do look like Easter lilies, but the leaves are much thinner. So it has little needle-like,
Mhm.
very thin grass-like leaves.
Just beautiful.
And there's actually, you can see there's some more on the corner over there. You can
So
kind of see
you
them
may
up.
have quite a few in the next couple of years.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
they do seem to spread through the garden now that there's been a few of them. And uh, sometimes one disappears. There used to be one on the front side of the house that I'm pretty sure some mice made a nice meal out of. So that one's not there anymore, but the ones on the corner here are relatively new.
So you get some surprises coming up. So nature provides a gift every once in a while. Tell me a little bit about what you have done as far as organizing plants, or is that part of your creative expression in the garden?
And I would say I started with wanting to add a lot of daylilies,
Oh, mm-hmm.
and I will switch. There's one early bloomer there that was already here. But over time, what I wanted to add became more about trying to rebuild prairie type settings.
I noticed
Or,
as you went around the house that you had, in addition to the peonies, it had a kind of a natural look.
yeah, and just turning back that way.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot here that is goldenrod, asters. There's some sunchokes or Jerusalem artichokes in here. Most of it'll start blooming in the next month or so. But I did move some of the sunchokes from another part of the yard, but the asters and goldenrod were ones that popped up in this area on their own. I'd planted them in other beds and the seeds spread around.
So, do you have a vision of it becoming more natural as time goes on, or do you keep some areas domesticated, so to speak? You know, that's part of the gardening thing.
I I'm very much enjoying the wild qualities that are in the garden now. And it's nice that more, I would think of the tall lily that I showed earlier as being a more of a domesticated plant.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of wild the way it's growing in the garden. But as far as, yeah, just more native plants, prairie plants, they will move through the garden on their own by
Mm-hmm.
seed. And if you give me a moment, I'm going to walk down to another bed that's filled a, with a lot of foxglove penstemon.
Oh,
That's actually a new area that was put in this year. And that's in front of the wild area that we just walked through.
yes.
So I actually have some cucumbers growing in there and some beans and some vegetables that I didn't have room in the regular garden for. This is the bed I was walking down to. And I think we'll have to walk around to the front to really see what's growing in here. But this was a bed that I planted more daylilies, peonies in, but over time the prairie plants just started taking over, and
Mm-hmm.
I just allowed them to take over. And some of the peonies have become smothered, some of them still hiding in some shady areas.
Mm-hmm.
Along the front, there's asters down here that'll bloom in the late summer and fall. And and actually, when I was coming around, I'll have to send you a photo of it. So the foxglove penstemon, um, when it blooms, has little white lavender flowers all
So
over it. There's a
beautiful.
few left,
Yeah.
but particularly in the morning dew, they almost glisten. And this bed is filled with them. And I didn't plant any down here. One plant came in and then slowly spread through everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just like the other plant that I have that's spreading a lot through the yard is black raspberries.
And you harvest those.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
harvest them. But that's maybe a part of my creative process, or a part of my creative process for the garden that's important to me is I harvest fruits that are in the garden, but also I leave some to share with the birds. And I'm pretty sure the birds planted a lot of what was here, so I make sure that they get their own bellies full too in the process.
So, what other berries do you have? And you said fruits. You have some of those. I know I've seen pictures of apples on occasion.
Oh yeah, we'll walk down to where the apple trees are.
And cherries. Do you have cherries?
Yeah, I do. And there's actually a cherry tree that has a few cherries on it still. Did the last picking of it last night.
Mm-hmm.
So on our way to the apple trees, this is, I come back and see the driveway up to the house.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a sloped bank. And this is an area that's filling in with a lot of native plants. And this is a bank that I did plant the native plants in. I went to one of the nurseries in town and told them I was looking to fill in an area with natural landscaping, and they gave me an assortment of asters, goldenrod, you see the oxeye sunflower. There's some Joe Pye weed in here. There's butterfly weed. Oh, there's one of the butterfly
And
weeds.
they're all great pollinators too, so they have this co-creative quality going on with you.
And there's a lot of dragonflies and butterflies that are over this bank in the summer.
Beautiful.
Oh, here we go. This is one of the cherry trees.
Mm-hmm.
But
Still just a few. Mm-hmm.
it is hanging on. It's a tree that you can see the sap running out of it. Some borers got into it,
Oh,
and I wasn't sure it was going to make it, but it's still sticking around making fruit. And near it are some of the apples. So the apples are already starting to get nice sized. A part of earlier when I was talking about thinning and trimming, the little apples that are in the clusters,
mm-hmm.
I haven't come down and thinned them yet, but that helps the ones, picking out the small ones helps the ones that are there develop so that the tree isn't overburdened.
Do you have various types of apples, or are they all the same?
There's 3 heirlooms. The one I'm standing by now is known as Newtown Pippin,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the first year it's fruited. So it's been here since probably around 2008, and it's taken it this long to produce fruit. Some of the heirlooms take several years or quite a few years before they produce fruit. Next to it is one known as winter banana. It has some nice fruits forming on it.
Mm-hmm.
And next to it is one called 20-ounce pippin. So when I chose these 3 apple trees to put in the yard, I wanted to try growing heirlooms. And I also wanted to get apples that ripened at different times.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so they're the 20-ounce pippin, which makes some of the largest apples I've ever seen. They fill up when I hold them, they're bigger, almost bigger than a handful. And they ripen usually first in late August into September. Then September to October is the winter banana. And then October is the Newtown Pippin. Although I guess I will find out this year, since it's the first year it's making fruit, if they actually ripen that late or if they ripen earlier.
Yeah. Very cool. So you did have some plans about some specific things that you wanted to put in, and some areas that you wanted to allow nature to just provide whatever was nature's opportunity to provide. So did you have did you draw it all out beforehand, or was this an intuitive kind of expression? How's it developing?
Well, I'd say the last 7 years, I don't make sketches and plans for planting in the garden anymore. I work kind of with what's here, but see, that spring of 2006 and probably 3 or 4 years after that, I do have old sketches of what I thought would be nice to plant where, working with the gardens that were already in the yard, expanding some of them, changing some of them, and so forth. But over time, I'd sometimes make plans and I'd come out in the garden and like, oh, that's not going to work. So I've grown more into sort of intuitive and just sort of maybe relying on my intuition a little more about what I'm going to do from day to day, as well as knowing the seasons and what can be planted before the last frost and what needs to wait to be planted after the last frost and so forth.
Yeah, I know we had a tough year last year whenever everything had that hard freeze, and you and I had talked about the mulberry trees. Did your mulberry trees come back okay this year?
Oh, they did, and I'm heading over into that area now.
I noticed that mine, maybe I'm not remembering correctly, but it always seems that mulberries would be at their peak the first couple weeks of July, around July 4th. And this year, mine are almost done. So it was an unusual year for me to have that experience where I was expecting things to be more in the later part of June, early July. Do you have a sense of that for especially mulberries now that we're talking about them, I guess?
I think they are earlier this year. Oh, and I was looking, there was a couple of robins hopping around in the tree, and there is still one up there.
Mm-hmm.
Hiding in the leaves. Oh, just flew away. But things seem to be running a couple of weeks early this year, in my mind anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So the mulberries here, there's still some developing, and there's some nice ripe ones.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of them. I didn't plant any, one of the plants I didn't plant. I didn't plant any mulberry trees in the yard.
No, they have a tendency to show up. Mm-hmm.
They do. I did plant elderberries, and they have spread all throughout the yard. And this is one of the larger shrubs that's next to two old apple trees that were here when I moved into this house and garden. And I always think of the elderberries as blooming at solstice.
Yeah.
And so they're running a couple of weeks ahead of time this year.
Okay. Well, I know that you're much more in tune with the cycles, and I just had to check because I thought, thanks for validation.
Oh, you're welcome. We did not have a late frost this year.
True. Right.
Yeah, I probably have a note somewhere of when the last frost happened, but it might have been early April, mid-April.
Yeah, so things were earlier this year. Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned the vegetable garden, that I had some cucumbers on the side because I didn't have room for vegetables in the vegetable garden. So we've come around on the west side of the house, and the vegetable garden's here. So there's some garlic and kale. And the kale that's growing here is one of those spontaneous plantings in very early spring.
Mm-hmm.
Kale can come out before the last frost. In late spring, I grown some sprouts in the house for microgreens, and I started to be overrun with them, and I just brought them out and put them in the ground and let them grow. So now I have a very nice clusters of kale.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There were pea sprouts with them, but my companions in the garden, the bunnies, have devoured those.
Well, they know when to select the juiciest, sweetest shoots to eat. That's not surprising.
Yeah.
So, are you able to more or less support your vegetable needs and your berry and fruit needs?
I seldom buy vegetables at the store or even the farmer's market during the growing season, because there's just so much here. And I used to go to the farmer's market, and I miss it sometimes, but and I might go there I don't have I used to have a really nice peach tree. I don't anymore. So in peach season, I like to go to the farmer's market and get peaches.
Mm-hmm.
And I pick berries and I freeze them, so I have a pretty good supply of berries for the winter. And I don't buy that many at the store, every once in a while, but not that often.
So do you freeze or can or both?
I mostly freeze now. I have canned tomatoes before, but when the tomatoes are ready to be canned, it's very, very hot out. So being in the hot kitchen, I found really uncomfortable, and I didn't like heating the house up. I do have this idea of setting up a burner outside and canning outside. I haven't done it yet. Maybe this season, maybe next season, maybe I'll get to it or not. But um, I generally freeze tomatoes now rather than can them, so I don't heat the house up so much.
Yeah. It seems to be a little less work too to do the freezing. You know, so,
Yeah,
yeah.
a little less labor intensive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, what would be your next plan? The the grounds are what they are right now. Do you have any new visions popping up for maybe next year or the year after?
Um, well, there are two that I move between.
Mm-hmm.
So plans for next year, there happens to be a big sunny bank in the yard. And it's an area that there wasn't a garden to expand, and I haven't put anything in. Well, once I planted a pine tree in the middle of it, but it didn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but this big sunny bank, I can't decide if I want to plant shade trees or turn it into a big pumpkin patch.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
this year I thought about planting the pumpkin patch out here on this bank, and I decided that that was a little bit more than I had the energy for.
Mm-hmm.
And this year it's going to be grass, and I'll keep thinking about whether it's going to be a pumpkin patch or I want to add some shade trees into this area.
Mm-hmm. So you've given us a really thorough tour. How many acres do you have?
Uh, so I'm where I live, the lots are probably just a little under an acre.
Oh.
And so the yard is close to 2 acres, but that's the lot that the house is on,
Mm-hmm.
and the lot next door.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of standing right now where there's the house and there's gardens around the house. And this is the lot that in this neighborhood a house was never built on it. It's
Mm-hmm.
always been used as green space, and at different times different neighbors have taken care of it.
So you have been very efficient in being able to put in food products, let nature take its course, and it feels to me like a co-creation.
That is, yeah, it is. I was thinking about how working in the garden, it's collaborative. It's collaborative with everything down to the little particles of soil, and the large birds that fly through. Some days, some swans come walking through the yard
Oh,
looking for
beautiful.
food.
Mm-hmm.
There's a pond in the neighborhood not too far from this yard. Uh, Eagles fly over sometimes. There's some that nest just a mile or so east of here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a collaboration between the soil, the plants that are here, the trees, the birds, the pollinators. And my goal is to work with them to just build this nice refuge for all of us. And this year, some years it's like the year of this is the animal that's going to be around the yard a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's deer. One year it was snapping turtles.
Oh.
I kept finding them crawling through the yard. It was a year we had a lot of floods. They were
Mm-hmm.
coming out of the
Mm-hmm.
ponds and hanging out in the yard about this time of year. This year it's rabbits. They have decided that the brush pile that I clean when I clean the gardens out after not cleaning shrubbery out of the gardens for 3 years. There's a brush pile in the middle of the vegetable garden.
Uh-huh.
That is their home. So they have nests all up and down through this brush pile.
So it's really a team effort, in addition to what the weather and earth provides in that environment too. Uh, yeah. So it's an
Yeah,
intuitive expression.
yeah, and it's feeling, it's intuition in the sense of feeling and sensing what's here, what wants to be here,
Hmm.
what would be nice to grow. Um, and I'm standing by another section of the black raspberries that just popped up and started growing one year. And
Oh, it's significant space. Yeah.
yeah, and the black raspberries, those are the year they started to pop up everywhere, I think is when I started to really feel that sense of collaboration because I knew I hadn't planted them and I was watching the birds fly around. I'm like, oh, they have found raspberries
Hmm.
out in the woods, and then they've come here and they've sat in the trees and did what they did and dropped some seed, and
Hmm.
now there's raspberries everywhere.
What
So
a
that,
gift. Yeah.
yeah, so they shared with me, so I always try to make sure to share with them.
Yeah. So if you look back in your history, how long have you been um, enthusiastic and expressing yourself through the earth and with the earth and in collaboration with the creatures that come through at different times?
I have this vivid memory, and I when I was maybe four, maybe 5 years old, and I was in the vegetable garden with my grandmother, and it was muddy. And I was standing near the edge of the garden, and it was all nicely, they kept it nicely tilled and weeded, so the soil was really soft. And there'd been a big rain, and I kept looking at the mud, and I jumped as high as I could in the air and landed in the mud and sunk almost up to my knees. And it was just such a fun moment of play. My grandmother wasn't happy because she had to pull me out of the mud and dig my
Right.
shoes out of the mud. It's I think that that's one of my key memories to loving being in the garden and creating with the garden.
Yeah, it started out with joy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, well, Melanie, it's been a lovely tour. And I know we had planned to do this a different day, but the weather wasn't quite there. And today, with the sun, we were able to really see a lot and learn so much about what you do. I can feel the heart radiating in the energy in this garden that you have collaboratively steward. You are steward of the earth. Hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And if anyone would like to know a little more, um, you can check in. We'll be publishing this video uh, in a timely way based on the time that we have to get it out. But it's been a joy. Melanie Scott Dockery, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Trudy.